Welcome back to the deep dive. And this time we're doing something a little different. We're going to be taking a deep dive into one of the most infamous moments in American history, the assassination of JFK.
Absolutely. One of the biggest mysteries and most talked about events, I think, in American history.
Yeah, so just to set the stage for our listeners, what's so special about this deep dive? What are we looking at specifically?
Well, what we're going to be listening to and taking a look at are the actual police radio recordings and transcriptions from Dallas, November 22nd, 1963.
Wow.
So this is really like you are right there on the ground with the police officers as this is all unfolding.
It's not like the cleaned up, documentaries or like the books and stuff where everything's kind of been,
Really unfiltered.
Yeah, exactly.
This is as raw as it gets.
That's incredible. So, I mean, thinking about the JFK assassination, there are so many different theories, books, documentaries, movies. I mean, where do these recordings kind of fit into this whole, like massive amount of information?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of those other sources, they rely on, hindsight. They rely on, later analysis and things like that. But this is like right there in the moment.
Right.
Like you get to hear the confusion. You get to hear, them trying to piece together what happened.
Oh, wow.
And it really gives you a sense of just how chaotic that day was.
So paint a picture for us. Like, what's the scene in Dallas that morning? I mean, leading up to, the assassination.
Well, the thing that's so interesting about these recordings is you hear like the mundane stuff right before it happens.
Right.
15 minutes before the shooting, they're worried about crowd control. They're worried about traffic.
Just like another day.
Yeah. At 11:45 a.m., there's a transmission talking about how officers are, having trouble with the crowds on Irvay Street.
Wow. And then it's just like 15 minutes later.
Everything changes.
Boom.
12:30 p.m., this chilling transmission. It looks like the president has been hit. Have Parkland stand by.
Oh, my God.
And you can just hear it in the officer's voice, the disbelief, the urgency, and the dispatcher immediately notifies Parkland Hospital. It's amazing how quickly they react.
So they go from, worrying about crowd control to now dealing with a potential assassination.
It's a national crisis in a split second.
Okay. What happens in those next few minutes? Like, what are we hearing?
Well, it's a lot of confusion. Officers are giving conflicting reports about, where the shooter is, how many victims there are.
It's just chaos.
Total chaos.
But amidst all this chaos, do we get any clues? Do we get any leads?
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting. At 12:34 p.m., someone reports shots fired from the Texas School Book Depository.
Okay.
And then a few minutes later, another transmission says that a witness saw the shooter with a weapon in a second-floor window of that building.
So very quickly, they have a potential location?
Yeah, they zeroed in on it really fast.
Wow.
By 12:37, there's an order to secure the building.
Yep.
They specifically mentioned that window.
Looking back now, I mean, was that the right call? Was the Texas School Book Depository, the right place to be focusing on?
That's a good question, and it's one that's debated a lot. They had a potential location, they had a witness account, and the pressure was immense.
Right, a nation's in shock.
Exactly. But hindsight, is 2020.
Always.
So it's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you think about all the different things that could have happened, all the different ways it could have played out.
Yeah, and what's interesting is you hear them relying a lot on eyewitness accounts.
Which can be unreliable.
Exactly, especially in such a stressful situation.
Yeah.
And some of them were accurate. They pointed towards the book depository, but some of them sent the police on wild goose chases.
Wow. It's just amazing to think about, like, all those decisions being made in real time.
Yeah, and with so much at stake.
Yeah, I mean, and this was just the beginning of the story, right? I mean, we know that another tragic event unfolds and adds even more complexity to this already chaotic situation.
Absolutely. Just 45 minutes after the assassination, Officer J.D. Tippit is shot and killed.
And the recordings capture that, too.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. This is heavy stuff. I think we need to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we'll dive into Officer Tippit's murder and what these recordings reveal about that tragic chapter in the JFK story.
So with the Tippit recordings, it's interesting because we get to hear from someone who is actually there.
Right, because obviously with the assassination itself, we're hearing from the police officers, but not from, someone who was like right there when it happened.
Exactly, yeah. And in this case, it's a citizen using Officer Tippit's own radio to report the shooting.
Wow. So they're like on the scene.
Yeah, it's 1:18 p.m. and suddenly you hear this voice break through the static. "Hello, police operator, we've had a shooting here."
Oh my gosh.
And the dispatcher's trying to get information. Where's it at? What location on 10th?
So there's that initial confusion, like trying to figure out where it even happened.
Yeah, exactly. And you can just hear the tension in the dispatcher's voice. They're
Mhm.
dealing with the assassination and now this.
Right, and they don't even know yet that it's a police officer who's been shot.
Right. And then the citizen says, "It's in police." #10.
Oh, wow.
And you can just hear, like, the weight of that realization. A fellow officer is down.
Yeah, it must have been devastating.
Immediately, the dispatcher broadcasts a signal 19, that's the code for officer down, gives the location 510 East Jefferson.
So now they're dealing with two major crime scenes, the assassination and Officer Tippett's murder.
Yeah, and they're still trying to find the person who shot the president.
So what's happening with the manhunt at this point? Are they getting any closer?
Well, at 12:48, we hear them broadcast a description of the suspect, but it's so vague.
What do they have?
White male, slender build, about 5 feet 10 inches tall, weighing about 165 pounds, wearing a white T-shirt, and thought to be armed with a rifle.
I mean, how many people in Dallas fit that description?
Right, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
But you can hear in the recordings that they're not giving up. They're going door to door, searching buildings, interviewing people.
It must have been so frustrating dealing with all the conflicting information.
Yeah, and you can hear that in their voices, too. There are moments of hope when a lead pops up, but then it just goes nowhere.
So are there any breaks in the case during this time?
Yeah, actually, at 1:45, a report comes in that a suspect matching the description entered the Texas Theater.
Okay, so this is where it all comes to a head.
Yeah, the dispatcher sends out an urgent message. "Have information, the suspect just went into the Texas Theater on West Jefferson, supposed to be hiding in the balcony."
So all eyes are on the Texas Theater.
Multiple units converge on it. You can just hear the tension in their voices.
And then what?
Just 2 minutes later, at 1:47, an officer reports, "Suspect on shooting of police officer is apprehended en route to the station."
They got him.
Yeah. But notice how he says, "Suspect on the shooting of the police officer."
Right. Is this the same guy who shot the president?
And the dispatcher confirms it. "From the Texas Theater, caught him on the lower floor of the Texas Theater after a fight."
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Lee Harvey Oswald.
So with Oswald in custody, I mean, do things kind of calm down a bit?
Well, the initial frenzy dies down, but you can still hear this underlying sense of shock and disbelief in everyone's voices.
Like they know this isn't over.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like they know that even with Oswald's arrest, the search for answers is just beginning.
And it's really something else. Listening to these recordings,
Mhm.
you really get a sense of like the human side of this story.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're hearing real people dealing with this unimaginable tragedy in real time.
We often think about, history as just these like, dates and names and stuff, but these are like real voices.
Right. And it's important to remember that, these recordings, they're just a small piece of a much larger puzzle.
So what's missing from these recordings? Like what don't we get to hear?
Well, for instance, we don't hear the interrogations, the discussions going on behind the scenes.
Right. Right.
And we don't get the immediate reactions of key figures like Lyndon Johnson,
Who's suddenly the president?
Exactly. These recordings are really focused on that initial response, the police officers on the ground.
But I bet even with this limited view, I mean, these recordings have probably caused a lot of debate over the years.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, their authenticity has been questioned. Certain transmissions have been scrutinized by, researchers, conspiracy theorists.
Everyone's looking for clues.
Yeah, I mean, people have pored over every word, every pause, every bit of static, trying to find something that challenges the official narrative.
Which I guess is part of the enduring fascination with the JFK assassination.
Yeah, absolutely. Even decades later, it's still one of the most talked about events in American history.
So do these recordings, in your opinion, do they offer any definitive answers to the questions surrounding that day?
I wouldn't say definitive answers, but they definitely add another layer of complexity,
How so?
Well, they highlight the chaos of that day, the reliance on eyewitness accounts, which we know can be unreliable,
Right.
and just the speed at which the investigation unfolded.
So maybe instead of settling the debate, they actually add more fuel to the fire.
In a way, yeah. They force us to confront the ambiguity, the uncertainty of history.
Right? I mean, we can analyze all the evidence we want, but maybe there's just no satisfying answer to the question of who shot JFK and why.
Maybe some mysteries are just beyond our grasp.
It's both fascinating and kind of unsettling.
It is, but that search for truth, that desire to understand, it's what keeps us going.
And these recordings, these voices from the past, they keep that search alive.
Exactly. They remind us to question, to investigate, and to never forget what happened that day.
Well said. It's been an incredible deep dive, exploring these recordings with you.
It's been my pleasure.
And for our listeners who want to learn more, We'll include links to the full transcripts and other resources in our show notes.
Definitely. I encourage everyone to listen to the recordings for themselves. History is more than just facts and figures. It's about human experiences.
And these recordings capture that in such a powerful way.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again for joining us for this deep dive into the heart of the JFK assassination.
Thank you for having me.
And to our listeners, we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration into the depths of history, science, and culture.